All right, here we go. It is Monday night. What's going on, Dave? Been a couple of weeks, huh?
Yeah, man, it's good to be back.
You had some family stuff to deal with, huh?
Well, yeah, there's always stuff going on. I got a lot of kids, you know how it is.
Yeah, you and your football team over there.
That's right.
So, anyone who is unfamiliar with this show, if this is your first time, this is Ungovernable. My name is Matt, and this is Dave. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, share, notification bell, retweet. We are live on the blockchain, so if you are watching on Vim or on Odyssey, please upvote us and help us with the algorithm wherever you're watching, but especially on those platforms, because that is really the direction we want to kind of push people into that decentralized blockchain world. So definitely hit us up there. All right, we have another fantastic school education episode going. We are going to be talking about. Had you ever heard, Dave, of the concept of world schooling? Before I kind of brought up who our first guest is.
No, I hadn't until you told me that about the guests we were going to have on, and I Googled it a bit, but I really don't know too much about it, so I'm looking forward to learning some stuff today.
Yeah, I think a lot of people maybe I hadn't heard it until a handful of years ago when my wife and I were looking at like unschooling and that kind of stuff, and she had brought this up, and this was like really early on when one of our first kids was born. And we never really kind of, jumped at the opportunity. And I'm kind of kicking myself right now, but I'm sure she will I'm sure our guest will tell me that there's no time like the present
Right.
to get into this. So without further ado, I am going to bring on Lainie. Lainie, I didn't ask you before, is your last name Liberty,
It
or
is.
that it's unplanned, folks. This is like, it's fantastic. This is unplanned, but it's fantastic.
I mean, what can I say? I mean, it's a good name to have.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with you, just kind of give them the Reader's Digest, who are you version.
Wow. Well, most people know me for my work and advocacy around world schooling. And I'm sure you can ask, what is world schooling? So I guess I'll just jump right into it. So
Go for it.
world schooling is using the world around us as a rich platform to learn from. And it's really that simple. So there's a really rich world schooling movement happening. And my son and I actually helped to spearhead this because it was important to differentiate or dimensionalize this kind of education. But it's different than just saying homeschooling or unschooling or self-directed education or anything else, right? It's different because you could combine all of these different methodologies as long as you're using the world around you to educate. And so that's a little bit of mind expansion there. And we'll talk a little bit about definitions a little bit later on because they play a key role on how we view the world, right? We've decided that this definition has this significant meaning. Therefore, it must always mean that. Therefore, I must stick to that very rigid way of thinking. And so, yeah, that's part of the deschooling or the unpacking of all of this stuff. So
Yeah.
It's that. And the last thing I want to say about my experience is because you could combine the world around you as the form to learn from, we also practice what's called, or what a lot of people know as unschooling. And then if you want me to get into definitions a little deeper, we were radical unschoolers. And if you want to go another path, we can say that my son is a self-directed learner. Or if you want, I could say I'm a lifelong learner. Or if you want, we can just keep going with this if you want.
Yeah. There's a lot of terminology. I think it really boils down to something that we talked about in episode 1, and this is something that Dave brought up and you hit on it right there. Like, kids are just natural learners.
Yeah.
So it's unnatural to like put them in rows and make them sit straight and be quiet and sit there and look at what's written on the board and like memorize these things and stuff like that. They're very good experientially. And as like, the necessity is the mother of all, of invention, kind of thought process. Like kids are very much of that mindset. They adapt, they come up with new ways of doing things, and in a lot of cases, unconventional ways of doing things. So, take us back to the moment. Like, was it something where you were like, I'm done with the school system? Were there other kind of circumstances surrounding this kind of life decision? What really led up to you and your son choosing to kind of, branch out and be world schoolers?
Yeah, origin stories are really good because they give you context, right? Before I get into that, I just want to say I really appreciate the bug, that your logo above my head. I love having the anarchy symbol next to me. Me feel warm.
I can pull it away if you want, or I can put it back on there.
Yeah. So my son and I are originally from California, although we haven't resided there since 2009. 2008, as you know, the economy crashed. In California, we were hit really hard. At the time, I worked in branding, marketing, advertising, that sort of thing. And for the last 8 years of a almost 20-year career, I owned my own agency. So when the economy crashed and the majority of my clients were, rescue dog here. Yeah. He's very nervous. His name is
That's
Carlos.
okay. We're animal friendly. That's all right.
It's okay. It's okay. He'll mellow out.
Yeah.
So yeah, when the economy crashed and my clients went away, I said to my son, single parent, he was 9 years old. I said to him, I'm done with this. I'm overstressed. I'm missing out on your childhood. Let's go have an adventure. Let's just get rid of all of our shit. Like working in consumerism, working in advertising and branding, I was so engulfed in the consumerist lifestyle, and it just felt sickening to me because not only what were we consuming and we were contributing to this lifestyle, I was putting it out there as part of my my profession. And I'd say probably those that work in advertising and those that are air traffic controllers, we have the two most, stressful jobs if you have a conscience. So it just wasn't working for me. I was overstressed in the idea of just selling all of our stuff, the stuff that felt so heavy and weighing us down, and heading out with my son and spending time with him for a year just sounded great. It had nothing to do with education. Being a single parent at the time, well, still being a single parent and the breadwinner too, like the one who was working so hard because I bought into the cultural belief that I have to provide for my son, and the only way I could provide for my son is working hard and not seeing him and missing out on his stuff. Like it just wasn't congruent with everything that I stood for. So we just left. We sold. It took us about 6 months. I knew that in the beginning of 2009, I wasn't bringing back my staff from the holidays because I just couldn't afford to my clients went away, and we had already started to sell our stuff. And so within 6 months, we had everything sold. We had moved out of a 2,000 square foot loft in California. I sold my Mercedes, like everything. Done. And we hit the road with backpacks. Too heavy, but we hit the road with backpacks. And that was Mexico, believe it or not, was our first stop. And here I am talking to you from Mexico.
Well, so I am made of questions. I'll put the ball in your court, Dave, so I'm not like monopolizing the conversation. But hearing Lainie's backstory, what's one of the first questions that comes to your mind, Dave?
Oh man, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I guess the first question I would have, it's speaking of origin stories, right? Is like when what resources did you use to like get this all started and stuff? I mean, and also I know that in other countries there's all different types of rules about quote unquote homeschooling. I know like in Mexico it's very difficult from what I heard from people that I know there, but maybe it's not the case. I don't know. Obviously I haven't been there, but what has your been experience with interacting with the laws in other countries and having to, I would be worried about getting started in that direction.
Well, the great thing is if you are in a country on a tourist visa, you are not held accountable for their education laws. So that's the first thing. We lived in Ecuador for a year, Guatemala for a year, Panama for 6 months, Peru for 3 years as our base. But the entire time that we were there, we were living on a tourist visa. So we would leave and come back, and those sorts of laws really didn't apply to us. However, I will say there obviously is a lot of privilege about being able to do that as a tourist, right? We lived as close as visiting locals as possible. But the majority of the people that knew us and befriended us understood that we were taking care of our education requirements in a different way. And that gave us a little bit of leeway there. But I didn't even tell you the story of how we came to sort of deschooling and not not going to school, like, and how it transformed.
So I've heard some of the one-on-one interviews with your son, and he has mentioned deschooling. We actually, our first episode was called Deschooling, but we didn't necessarily go into the depth of it. But so there's basically a transition period, right, where when you're a kid that has been in traditional public education or traditional centralized education, there's kind of like this, time where you have to like almost detox almost, or just kind of reset, right?
Yeah, clearly. And Matt, I would say it's not just the kids that are going through the deschooling. It's really there. It takes a lot more for the parents to deschool than the actual child. And, that's where partnership parenting comes in, and that's where mental health comes in, and really digging into, what am I accountable for? What are the belief systems that I'm holding on to as a parent surrounding the idea of education? What is the purpose of education? What are the values that our family, holds? Where are we in alignment with the purpose of traditional education? Where are we not in alignment? And how can we define and live without rules? Hi, anarchist, live without rules, but self-imposed rules that, we inherited through generations and through culture as a whole. The deschooling is taking the time to look at that stuff, unpack it, and, really redefine as a family. If we are approaching education as a family, or a different way of educating as a family, and the structures coming from within the family, we've got to take our time to really decide what that means to us.
Yeah, no, that sounds, it sounds, what a lot of people don't understand is, because they haven't necessarily lived that life, that there is that period of time that really requires a dramatic mental shift in terms of the way that you view things. And so, yeah, I mean, how long, I mean, it could be an ongoing process, but like, how long would you say for you and your son, it took you as far as that goes?
Well,
real quick, how old was he when you first switched?
So he was 9 years old when we left the United States.
He had been going to normal school for the previous 4 years.
Normal school, and I took him out, and like I said, we're going to travel for 1 year. That was our goal. Right. And I knew intuitively that 1 year of travel, he would learn way more than fifth grade could offer in public school system. The idea was I put him back into school. but we never went back. So, yeah. So that to me was kind of the transition point, the decision not to go back. But if I could back up for a second, and I know, Matt, you heard our TEDx talk, and we've spoken about this a lot, but one of the primary things that my son and I did before we left on our journey was we made a pact to be partners. And that shifted the paradigm from an authoritarian paradigm to a partnership paradigm. But I didn't know how important that paradigm was going to be when we started to talk about learning and education. But we were talking about it from, my dog is growling. We were talking about it from the perspective of like travel, like budget. This is our money. Where are we going? These, it's not me telling him where we're going. We were having a co-adventure. Right. And for the first 7 or 8 months, we got to really practice what partnership in real life looked like, because I knew the concept, obviously, but part of my deschooling started then when I started to really shift the paradigm of parenting to walking alongside of my son versus walking in front of him and pulling him my way. That shifted hugely. And I remember the day we were 8 months into our travels. We were sitting in Antigua in Parque Central, and he said, "Mom, let's just do this forever. I don't want to go back." And I said, "Okay."
You're like, "Yeah, sure."
So, yeah, and that was the point where I, as responsible adults, although some would argue that I'm not, that's the point where I had to really take accountability for what education will be, what the education, how we were going to approach that. And so I am a researcher. I research everything. Guess what? I'm a self-directed lifelong learner. I read everything. I watch lots of videos. I listen to podcasts. When I saw your podcast, it was the first time I saw you. And I was like, deschooling, I love this topic. I'm going to go. Right. So, yeah. And that's when I discovered there was something called unschooling. And I was like, that's a weird name. That's like the not doing something. But when I read about the philosophy of unschooling, I was like, we're already doing this. Oh my God. We started to unpack together. I presented this to Miro. I was like, look, here's what this, unschooling thing is. We're already doing this. Like, does this sound like something that you want to pursue? And he's like, hell yeah. Right? We don't have to do workbooks. Yeah. And then we started to unpack the things that we had already learned in those first 8 months. And he's like, yeah. And then I realized I'm learning too, right alongside him.
So that was going to be my next observation was, talking about that partnership. If you're learning right alongside of your child, that definitely kind of like automatically shifts that kind of power dynamic almost, or that like hierarchical structure. A lot of those first years, I believe, or maybe most of the years, were kind of like Central and South America, right? Had you spent much time in any of those countries prior to setting out on your journey?
Never.
So you were basically learning this stuff brand new, just right alongside of your son.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And neither of us knew Spanish. And within a year and a half, my son, without a single class, became fluent.
Yeah.
I'm still struggling. I could show you my Spanish books that are unopened. Yeah. 12 years in Latin America, and I'm still, I could have a conversation, but don't talk to me about philosophy or love. Like, I can't go there.
Yeah. So right? Your Spanish poetry book is not going to be coming out anytime soon.
No, it's not going to, I promise you.
All right, go ahead, Dave, because I know we've also had some talks in our we have some private chat groups that we're in, Dave and I, and there's obviously been a lot of fervor about people having questions, obviously, because this is so new to some folks. But what else comes to mind, Dave, in terms of setting out on this journey? Would you go on this journey, Dave? Is this something that you would be interested in?
Well, I have to get the answers to my questions first, and then I'll know.
Yeah.
So I guess the one thing that really strikes me that your situation is maybe unique is that there's just two of you. So one thing that I think changes that hierarchical dynamic or whatnot, right, is if you have more of a traditional family with a husband and wife, and then you have, say, 3 kids.
Sure.
Okay, well, Joe wants to go here and Sally wants to go there. And it's like, well, we can't just do whatever, right? Between 2 people, there's a lot more you can give and take because there's only one other person. It's very difficult for adults even to balance the needs of a lot of other people, but especially for children to say, well, my brother wants to go here and I don't want to go there. And mom's signing with him instead of me. And all those, and then just add another kid, it makes it even more complicated. So I don't know if you've, obviously with your broad experience with different people doing this, what would you have to say to people in those situations?
Yeah. And I hear that that concern is such a good question. I actually, founded another company called the Partnership Parent Movement. And these are a lot of the issues that we work through with other families. And I've also given family culture workshops at my conferences for years. And so this is through feedback and through, this kind of unpacking, I've gotten a lot of feedback on how it works with families that are not equal, that are not just 2 people. So I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell. Okay. But it may take a little bit longer than unpacking a nut. So
sure.
I'm going to try this real quick. So family culture is really important. And if we're deciding as a family that we are not going to function on an authoritarian paradigm, then together as a family, we need to unpack what that's going to look like. So if we have a family with a lot of young children, we need to start talking about what decision making looks like. There is, majority, there is consent, which is what I always strive for. And as somebody who has facilitated teen retreats around the world for anywhere between 8 and 15 teenagers at a month at a time, we utilize consent, right? And try and get 15 teenagers to agree on anything. It takes time.
Yeah.
You can do it. So, or it could be going back to the authoritarian paradigm. You don't know, I get the final rule. And if that's the structure of quote unquote internal governance, which I hate that word, I do, within your family, then it's decided. But if you strive for consent, then unpack what consent looks like and allow each family member to test that out. And what that's going to require is patience. Now, when you're world schooling, guess what? We got time because we're together, right? Yeah. Or if we're in this pandemic, or this, whatever this is, we're together because now life looks very different because the outer world has shifted somewhat, right? A lot of families that I've worked with over the last year and a half didn't come from the world schooling background, but came from, other backgrounds that are now for the first time in home education. And they haven't sorted their family shit out yet. And that's where you've got to start first. So the first way that I'm going to answer Dave's question is figure out how you're going to structure your family governance, and give me a better word because I don't like that word.
Yeah.
The second thing would be live without rules. And the only way that you can live in a family or in a community without rules is by jointly, collectively defining what your family values are. So if the core values are, okay, we want everybody to be heard, we want equality, or we want respect, or we want to garden. I don't know what it is. Whatever it is for you, everybody has to put that in. And then when a decision needs to be made and you're already following the structure of governance that you've collectively decided on, run it through the filter of those core values. Is this in alignment with my core value? Because going to bed at 10 o'clock is arbitrary. That's an arbitrary rule. But getting rest so we as a family can do this thing that we all decided on and all be rested is a shift, right? That's a totally different way of functioning in partnership, right? Yep. So nobody is making the rules, but as the adults or the parents, you're there to to articulate what the structure is and to allow people to be heard and seen and understood as they function within this family culture that you've collectively defined. Does that help a little bit, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I would think that I try to run my family govern, as I know you love that word, my family in a similar manner. And obviously there's times where that can be difficult, but I think for the most part, trying to, as you pointed out, consent and having shared values and all those things are so important, which is why it's so important for parents to spend time talking about those values with children instead of just assuming that like they are the same as yours or leaving it up to some random strangers to tell them what those values are supposed to be. I feel like a lot of parents have a hard time with, well, there's no way I could do that because my kid would just want to like play video games all the time and like eat Cheerios or whatever. But it's like, well, okay, sure. If you haven't spent a lot of time educating them as to why those are the right things to do or not the right things to do, like you said, like, hey, we need to get rest, right? Like no one likes to be tired all the time. Like if you don't spend time talking about those things, then of course all you're saying is that your kid is like unable to make good choices, which is even more of a reason to remove them from the situation that they're in now. Like that doesn't, right? I don't know that.
Yeah, no, totally. But I actually want to respond to the playing video games. Like that's a big issue that comes up in the unschooling world. Yeah. And it really is not a matter of, and I hear people say it's about video game addiction. It's about self-regulation, right? This is the issue. And if we prevent our children from having the experience of self-regulating, meaning they need to go overboard, they need to play with what that feels like. And as parents, especially for younger kids, we need to trust through the safety, the space of safety, that it's okay to kind of go on the other side and then create dialogue around, well, how are you feeling? You just played video games for 14 hours. You didn't sleep last night. How are you feeling? And make it a safe space instead of a judgy, controlling space for them to be able to internally get the motivation to regulate, because I'll guarantee you it may take a couple years. And Miro played video games for 3 years, pretty solid. But because we had this partnership, like I never judged him on it. I said it was okay, but he also knew, because of the partnership and the two of us, that I wanted to go to an archaeological site, and that was one of the things that he could do to support me while I was supporting him on his passion, which was video games. Like he turned the computer off and we went, and he did that, which is very different than a lot of families that I hear where the kids have been controlled. They won't shut off the computer. They won't. Like they're tired of being controlled. This is what they want to do. And they're getting the message that what they like and their desires are not as important as what you think I should be doing. And that won't lead to self-regulation.
Yeah, I can see that in my personal family dynamic. If my son and I are like the people that like to play video games, and he will have those moments where he is engrossed in it and he won't get away from it. And the reason why he won't get away from it is because I can, like, if I put myself in his place, there's an arbitrary line being drawn in the sand, at least from his perspective. Yeah. And when it's like, well, stop, you've been playing for so long. It's not like, well, here's this other alternative that you said you wanted to be involved in, or, here's something that you have coming up that is timely that you need to do some work toward or something like that. if it's an arbitrary line that gets drawn in the sand, there's much less buy-in, if not none, and then it becomes conflict, right? Whereas when there's that, mutual, like, well, you said you wanted to do this, so if you don't walk away, from this, put this down and do this, then you are going to miss out on, the goal or that achievement. It seems to work out a lot better, when we kind of take it from that tact.
Absolutely. And if they had no say in the making of that arbitrary line, then they don't have the buy-in.
Yeah.
And the other point is, like, in the Western culture, we're so afraid of being uncomfortable, and we're so afraid of allowing our children to fail and letting them be uncomfortable. Trust me, I've done it a million times. I want to take the pain away. I want to fix the problem. But that's me getting in the way of my son's own sort of tapping into his own what is it called? Intrinsic motivation. And not only that, but is, again, going back to self-regulation. What really feels good? What makes me tick? What am I accountable for? Because I want to be accountable for it. And when I fuck up or when I screw up as a kid, like, knowing that I'm not going to be punished, but I am going to be living with the natural consequences of that choice. Punishment and rewards don't work.
Yeah.
I've had that similar experience with my son will, like, stay up late and play games or something like that. And sometimes we both, like, I have to go to work in the morning and he has to go to school in the morning, and then, like, we'll stay up late and then we'll wake up at 6 in the morning to go to work, and we're both super tired. And it was like, man, that was we stayed up too late last night. Okay, we got to get to bed early tonight. And he's like, yeah, I know for sure, because it was late, right? And, like, yeah, you can stay up so late sometimes, and, like, yeah, you're tired the next morning. You're like, you know what, but it was worth it. That was a really fun night, and that was whatever. Like, I don't need to get 8 hours sleep every single night, right? Like, right. You can survive, right? And also learning how to the fact that, like, yeah, I need to get to school the next day, or need to do whatever I need to do. And, like, we need to wake up because this is what we have planned for the day. Like, I certainly need to go to work. That's not changing. And I have to wake up in the morning. So, like, yeah, sometimes you're gonna be tired and you have to wake up anyway, and you have to go to work. Like, that, learning how to deal with that is an important life lesson, right? Like, you're not always going to have someone telling you when to go to bed and when to wake up, and learning how to get up with 4 hours of sleep and get through an entire day, even though you're really, really tired, is a valuable life lesson. Like, it's going to be that way sometimes. Sometimes you're going to feel like crap and have to do stuff that you don't want to do. Like, that, I don't know, that's life, but
it is life.
I think it's important to realize that that's how it is. Like, yeah, you didn't get to sleep. That's fine. Like, now you're tired. Okay, great. Like, that's a natural consequence. You don't need to come up with some new one, right? If your kid's running in the middle of the street, like, okay, sure, right? Like, don't let that happen because he's going to get hit by a car. He's going to get hurt, right? Like, so sometimes as a parent, like, you do need to step in, right? Like, oh, he's playing with a knife and he's going to hurt. Like, okay, no, stop. Like, right? Because that natural consequence is not one that we want him to face, right? Yeah. He's going to really hurt himself, and he's not really going to learn from this. It's going to be worse, right? The poison is worse than the cure, whatever you want to call it, right? But, like, when there's a natural consequence of some action, like, just let the natural consequence happen, right? Like, they're going to be tired, and then okay, like, that's it. There's a very natural consequence. We can let them suffer, as it were, and we're fine. We just move on, and we hopefully learn to go to bed earlier, or we don't, and we just say, yeah, that's the price to pay for staying up late playing games or doing whatever I want to do, reading a book or hanging out with my sister or whatever else. Like, is that I'm tired the next day. Like, every adult makes a decision every single day, right? Yeah. Like, am I going to go to bed at 10 o'clock like I said I was going to this morning because I was super tired, or am I going to stay up late watching Netflix or doing whatever else, right? Like, that's another thing that I always think is funny, because parents are like, well, no, if you let your kid figure that out, then they're going to stay up all night playing video games. It's like, yeah, but what do most adults do, right? Like,
right?
They stay up late watching Netflix or watching Monday Night Football or watching whatever other thing they want to watch. Like, it's the same problem. I don't know. I've never understood that one.
Yeah. Well, I have two responses to that. The first one is, like, Dave, I think is it Davey or Dave?
David.
David.
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
Your name says
either
David.
Way. Yeah, it's Davey Max 3. That's just my Twitter handle. But yeah, Dave or David, usually what people call me.
I mean, you chose connection over coercion. So you stayed up and played video games with your son. And that is more valuable than teaching the lesson of that one day. Like, in his mind, the connection part that you just reaffirmed for him will be more longer lasting than the disconnect of get to bed, and here's the coercion part, which is control, which is based on authoritarian paradigm, which is us as anarchists. We don't want that. Why are we living in an authoritarian paradigm in our own families and teaching our children that authority is okay, but then here we are claiming that we're anarchists? There's disconnect there. And then the other thing I was going to say is there's an amazing book. I think the woman's who wrote it, her name is Judith Lightoff. I think that's right. And she wrote a book called The Continuum Concept. And she lived in the Peru Amazon with a community for many, many years and studied the way that they raise children. And you mentioned that playing with knives, don't let them poke their eye out. There's this whole oh, thank you. You brought it up. There's this whole, bit in the book where she's talking about the way that they approach fire and how it's okay that the children get really close to the fire because that's their experience of how they're learning. And there's no judgment as, is this right or wrong? And in the Western world, we want to protect our children. Obviously, we don't want them to get hit by cars or poke their eyes out with knives. But there is something to be learned about the way that some of these indigenous cultures are actually rearing their children with the concept that they know everything that they need to know. They're not an empty vessel that needs to be filled up, right? So if they know everything that they need to know, then getting close to the fire is part of the experience of knowing. And that, again, is a mind shift for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, the fire is a natural thing, right? It's very hard to get burnt by a fire, not like a house fire, it's arson or something, right? But a bonfire, right? It would be hard for you to get hurt, except, if you were really, really little, and you fell into it or something. But if you're old enough to walk and move around and run and things, it would be very, very difficult for you to get seriously injured by a bonfire, right? You might get a little hot and, singed, but we're okay, right? Because it's a natural consequence where you don't die, right? Those types of things are going to be okay. And yeah, it just made me think of also the school I teach at, the boys are allowed to have knives with them, and they almost all of them have a knife on them. And we never have stabbing incidents at the school or whatever. The worst that happens is there's some furniture that gets nicked up by some kid who's, being an idiot, but okay, fine. Right. But it always surprises me that people are oh, there's always issues in schools with violence or whatever else. It's all these students have knives and they never knife each other. This never happened ever. So a kid having a pocket knife on him is seen as some dangerous thing that can't be allowed. But I mean, I see it every day. And they're not the most most responsible individuals, all these people, right? But they end up being more responsible because they have a knife, right? They're
because they're empowered with the trust.
Right.
They're empowered. Yeah.
No, exactly. That's exactly right.
So I want to make sure there's obviously so much that we could dive into here, and there's so much more that we can talk about your specific travels and kind of experiences, which I want to get to, Lainie. But so I also want to pepper in a couple of questions and comments from people that are watching, just so that they're in the mix. So one that I think you probably continue to get, because I've seen some of the comments on your TED Talks and stuff like that, is the financial question, right? So how do you pay for world schooling? It sounds like you came from a situation where you either you had a successful business and you either sold it or there was some kind of nest egg to draw off of in order to do this from. Do you have to be comfortable financially, or can you, thumb rides and work your way through, say, Central and South America to world school?
Yeah, it's a fair question. The first year of our travels, we had sold and saved up enough to not have to work. And our goal was to travel for 1 year and live comfortably and not worry about it. But guess what? We decided to continue doing it. And going from somebody who was creating consumerism, who was highly consumerist, to deciding together that the only way that we could prolong what we were doing was we started the pact that we made was we were collecting memories, not things, and we were going to live minimally. And for the next 3 or 4 years, I was able to earn online enough money working minimally, which was about $1,000 a month, and live locally. And so that's how Miro and I lived, like to go from like, Mercedes, like 2,000 square foot loft to really living below the poverty line by choice and being able to have that experience. I mean, it wasn't always easy, trust me. And there were moments where like, I really wanted to buy that face cream, but I couldn't or whatever. But it was incredible. Like we were alive. And for what world schooling and traveling with my son did for me is it gave me the ability to be present in my life, which was something that I hadn't been for 20 years. I was busy working. I was distracted from my own feelings. I was distracted from noticing, the dew on the leaf or the sunrise. I was distracted from anything.
Yep.
And, watching my son grow up, I missed the first 9 years, literally.
Yeah, no, I can feel that pressure because I'm a business owner, and I feel that every hour I'm not in the office is an hour where I could be in the office making money, which is, like you said, it's a very counterintuitive mindset to someone who is more like David, who is, David works his day and then, but he's very family centric, which I kind of envy, right? Like I actually COVID has caused me to reassess those priorities and really kind of rethink, where I should be spending my time and what's worthwhile. There's another comment / question. So you transitioned from your child being a drone in a facility to basically useful learning. But like, is there some kind of, so did your son end up getting some kind of credential? Like, did he end up going and getting his GED or anything like that?
Nope.
Or is his credential basically this life experience that he can walk into any room and basically talk about?
Yep.
Yeah.
There is absolutely zero, like he didn't do a GED. Like there was a point where, look, we've been at this for 12 years, right?
Yep.
There was a point where we were able to live the fuck the system, right? Like I really hope swearing is okay because I didn't
You're
ask.
okay.
Okay. Like, I mean, as somebody who is an anarchist, you could say that as much as you want.
Yep.
But when you're living within the system, you're not really fucking the system.
Yep.
We didn't care anymore about, having a credential. He didn't care. I mean, he has the option if he wants to. And I bet you anything with the education, and you should have him on your show. I told you that before. With the education that he's gotten, he would be offered a full ride at any Ivy League school if that's what he wanted to pursue. But he said, Mom, the only thing that I'm really interested in learning more about would be mythology. And what am I going to do? Waste my time and get a mythology degree? He's creating.
He could just travel around Rome and Greece and
And he has, and he does, and he's utilizing all that stuff in his writing. He's creating a tabletop game based on actual myth. He's facilitating young learners now. We created our business together, so he's ran businesses. Like,
that's awesome.
Like I could do the proud mama thing and give you my list of things that he's done, but he, gave a TED talk when he was 16. Yep.
Yeah. No. And I think that's the other thing. Dave talks about this all the time. In fact, I can let you run on this rant if you want, Dave. But
no, go ahead, please.
Just the idea of credentials, not only not being a good assessment of whether or not someone knows something, but it becoming like this enabling thing that allows people who aren't intelligent to think very highly of their intelligence, when truthfully what it boils down to is just being able to pay the bill to get the credential, right?
Right.
Because you know that credentialing process. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm all for, like, you know, entrepreneurship and building businesses and making a profit, but that credentialing process, you know, they don't want just like 2 or 3 people to get it, right? Otherwise it would cost $1 million in order to get it. They want tons of people to get that credential. And so it's not exactly like you're saying you're the top 5% by having most credentials. I mean, there's a handful of them, but, you know, the standard undergraduate degree is essentially the participation trophy of, you know, our generation, you know.
I have one.
Yeah.
Well, it's essentially governmentally mandated for tons of positions. Like, if you want to get a lot of government jobs, you need to have a college degree, right? If you want to get like certain positions, right, even in the Army, right, you need to have an undergraduate degree, and tons of people want to do those things. Forget being a teacher without a degree, right? As I tell my
teacher, he doesn't
in a public school.
No.
Okay, right.
Self-directed.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, if you want to work in one of the government jobs that they offer, right? Like, I'm talking about the military, police, teacher, right? Which some people are going to want to do, right? Like that. If I want to teach in my local town and there's a school there, and that's where I want to go to, I want to be a teacher there, whatever, right? Like, you need to engage within their system in order to have access to those jobs. But you're right. Obviously, like, you can. One of the former headmaster at the school I teach at was, or I don't think it was the headmaster, but teachers there was never even went to. I don't even know if he graduated high school. But private schools have those types of freedoms that, you know,
Right.
public schools obviously don't. But I think what I tell my students all the time is, like, you should be more willing or more likely to go to college the more that you assess that you are incompetent, right? Because you have more to gain by it, right? Like, and that's not to say that people are incompetent at certain things are like less human, right? But, like, yeah, if I'm not very good at things, if I'm not good at figuring things out on my own, and like but I am kind of good at listening to directions and other things like that, then, like, yeah, it might be reasonable for you to make that decision, because that's really your only pathway in life, right? Like, if by the time you're 17 or 18, you're like, I'm really incompetent, I can't figure out anything, I'm really not, I don't think I'm very smart or able to do anything. Like, there's people that are like that and have that self-awareness. Like, it does make sense for you to go through that route and try to at least get a normal job where you can, you know, pay your bills or whatever, because life is going to be really, really hard for you if you're a low IQ individual who doesn't have a family that's going to help them out with a certain job or a certain, you know, in someplace, right? Like, there are people, I mean, I know Jordan Peterson talks about that all the time, right? Like, that's a really serious societal issue that the left seems to, like, push out all the time, right? And then other people are like, well, they just figure it out. And it's like, well, no, like, some people can't figure it out as easily as others, right? Obviously, this is part of the idea, right? People are different, and we need to try to help each other out and things like that. Anyway, I don't want to go on this whole rant, but I just think it's important for people to realize, like, the degree, what function the degree or the credential actually has, right? Its function in society is to give, it's a certificate of competency, right? And I don't need a certificate saying that I'm a good teacher, because anybody who's ever had me as a teacher, or 90% of them, whatever, are like, hey, that guy's really good at this. And they'll tell other people that. And, like, I'm fine, right? Like, I could go get a job as a professional tutor very quickly, right? Like, I might have to charge very low for the first few people, but then after that, I would have more business I could ever want ever, because very quickly word gets spread around to all the parents, like, oh my gosh, we found a good teacher. Like, this is the most ridiculous thing ever. It's a unicorn we just found, right? Like, they don't exist. So, like, and this is the case in private tutoring, right? I have a acquaintance who makes like over $200 an hour as a private tutor. Because he's really good at it. And, like, anybody who's actually really good at this type of thing is going to make a lot of money. So all it is to say is, like, you're far more better investing in yourself and investing in your own competency and your own skills than to pay for someone else to say that you're competent. That's just like basic knowledge, in my opinion, but it seems to be somewhat controversial out there. So
no, I totally agree with you. And I think that goes back to our experience, like the first 8 months when my son said, you know, can we do this forever? And I said, yes. Well, one of the things that we had to do was to sit down and decide what is education and what education he wanted. And so we decided very early on, as we started to making our list, it was less about the academic learning, and it was more about like learning how to research and learning how to really tap into motivation, learning how to schedule, learning how to be accountable, like all of these things that people call the soft skills. Those were the things that were important to me. And he agreed. Those were the things that he wanted to gain. And so we no longer talked about education. We talked about learning. So learning was our goal. And as long as he had a love of learning, then he could learn anything, because we were both learning. We were learning because we were curious and nobody was telling us to learn. You tell me to do something, I'm not going to do it. But the moment that we decided that we were going to do it because we were there in the world and like it was interesting and it was fun and we had natural curiosity, that was our gift in this tool that we were carrying around on top of our shoulders. Like it functioned correctly. So we were able to research and dig deeper. And, my son was able to go beyond what his quote unquote grade level was because it was his passion. It was interesting to him. So that to me is more important, because once you've acquired those kinds of skills, you could learn anything. You could reprogram a belief system or a pattern of thinking and move through anything that's holding you back and figure out what it is that lights you up. How freeing is that? That's liberty.
That's one of the effects of the myth of school to begin with, right? Is that it makes people think that it takes a really, really long time to learn things.
Yeah.
Because that's what school does, right? Like you spend however many years in school to learn X technical skill, which you actually don't end up learning very well at the beginning, right? So then it trains people into thinking that, oh my gosh, it takes 4 years to learn how to do this activity. And then I did that and I still didn't learn it that well. So, oh my gosh, it must take like 15 years to learn it really well, right? And it's like, no, you've just been screwing it up the whole time, right? Like if you were actually like somewhat engaged with the activity and knew yourself really well and knew how you learned and knew how to learn things the way that you learn them, you could learn whatever that activity is way quicker than you're ever going to learn it in the school. Because, well, first off, you actually would, but then like, the next thing you need to figure out, you're going to figure it out, right? Like, I have tons of friends who figure these things out, right? They're really good guitarists or singers or, whatever. And like, they didn't go to school for that, but they figured it out. Or they had a couple people that were really good that they asked them questions for when they needed to and things like that, right? Like there's great computer programmers who never did this and people that can read great books and are writers and poets and all these other things. Like, do you go to poet school to become the poet laureate of the United States? Like, I very highly doubt it, right? So, right. I mean, this is just common knowledge when it comes to so many things. But for some reason, when it comes to certain academic subjects, everybody's like, no, that has to be the school thing. You can't learn it anywhere else. And then it's like takes 10 years. And it's just one of those effects that school has on people, is that it makes them think that the subjects that are taught by the school are hard to learn and can't be learned in a more efficient manner.
They think very X and Y. Right, like they think. Right. In fact, maybe not even X and Y, just X. Right, they think very linearly, which is something that you can effectively. I mean, that's part of the deschooling process, right? Is like not necessarily thinking linear anymore. And this question from a viewer actually kind of fits into this. So it's talk about basic fundamentals. So things like math, grammar, literacy. In terms of teaching that, do you have some allegories or some examples, Lainie, of things that your son that would be considered like, the basic skills, but they were learned through a life experience or something that you guys went through in your travels and that basically related back to like, I mean, did he learn money management through your travels and how?
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely. I would say, first of all, scope and sequence are what we've been led to believe is the only way that you can learn, right? You must do, here's the scope and here's the sequence of how you should learn it. And I'm here to say that, the school's definition of scope and sequence, and at the end, you suddenly gain this thing called education. It's bullshit. It's not real. The reason why math is taught is so that people can start thinking logically. Higher math especially is taught to exercise those centers of the brain that allows you decision making, to come up with conclusions, really to practice logic. The lower math, like arithmetic, that's learned through real life experience. My son learned that through money management. I told you in the beginning, our budget was our budget. He knew how much money we had. We had to, in many cases, translate that into soles or into colones or into, whatever the currency was, pesos at the time. So he was a lot quicker on that. And his joke was he could do that because quicker and in his head, because he didn't have to deal with the public school experience that I did. So, don't worry, I wasn't public school educated in that, so I'll figure it out. So, he was able to really figure out things logically as well, because he had the space and the time to reason. Now, for him, he's more on an artistic, like he loves literature. He's a brilliant writer. He's actually a poet. He writes like in the same grain as some of the, oh gosh, I'm going to just slaughter, but the what are they called? The Greek, you'll have to have him on and he'll have to tell you, but he's brilliant. He can decipher that. I mean, he was reading H.P. Lovecraft when he was 10, and he's like, ooh, words. Oh, wow. I love language. And that brought him into really being able to express himself in such a way that was like so powerful, because he wanted to be like that. Right. And that brought him into some of this, some of the reading college, university level when he was 10, 12 or 13, that's just what he gravitated towards. And then the other thing I would say is the difference between self-directed education or unschooling, or in our case, world schooling, is we engaged with mentors. When there was somebody who was doing a thing that he wanted to learn, we would either hire a mentor or we would spend time with them. And also internships are an amazing way to learn by doing. So we did all of that. It's not like he wasn't learning. It was really highly engaged learning. School and the school system wants you to be a generalist. And this allows the home educated kids to really specialize based on wherever their interests take them.
I love that. That's a fantastic take home. So to take that question a step further, I think something that kids don't necessarily get a very good exposure to in a traditional school environment is, like, everyone's worried about, the reading, writing, and arithmetic, but I would imagine in your travels, he was also exposed to more, and I'll use air quotes, like primitive things that you have to learn, right? So when you're living side by side with people that aren't necessarily completely reliant on hyper developed technology, you're learning other aspects of life that go along with that. Was that something that he was also drawn to, where it was life in a village and how they raised their food or built their house or whatever?
Totally. I mean, we built a co-op house. We lived up in the Andes with potato farmers. There's so many experiences that we had, and to be
plant potatoes, not wheat. Hold on, I gotta 1 sec. I don't know if you've read this before. I'm deviating a little bit. Sorry for cutting you off.
No. I want to see.
Have you ever read James C. Scott? My light's killing me.
Tell me about it.
James C. Scott is basically he's like a college level PhD who talks about anarchy and other aspects of basically being ungovernable from the standpoint of like more agrarianism. And looking at how, so like he actually wrote, I forget if it was a book or a paper, but he makes the statement that we didn't domesticate wheat, wheat domesticated us.
Yeah.
And he talks about how if you want to be governed by a central governmental authority, you grow something like wheat or rice because it's very evident where it is. It all matures at the same rate, so the tax man can show up at one time of year to see how much you have. You have to keep it in one place, whereas indigenous peoples and say like the mountains of Nepal and stuff like that were able to avoid centralized government authority by planting tubers like potatoes, yucca. What's one of the other ones he talks about? There's another one that's like yucca. That's kind of like a white. It's like a white potato on the inside, but I forget. Like the outside is orange. So, so he talks about all of these different aspects of essentially just food production and how that translates into one's ability to escape the state control and authoritarian control of your life, or be able to live a life that's kind of outside of that, or at least being able to avoid it in a way. But yeah, sorry, I deviated on a very deep rabbit hole there. Yeah. So I didn't mean to derail your thought process, but
No, it's
he
really
got involved in the food production and everything like that.
Yeah, well, that was one of his passions. So he was learning from the farmers how to cultivate seeds from puppers and from some of the indigenous plants. When we lived in Peru, we worked with ethnobotanists, and we learned about plant medicine, which was incredible. Also, ethnogens. I know I never say it correct. I always put another syllable in there, but like it's part of the culture. And I became really interested in learning about the traditional culture of like the mystical side of the people that lived in the Andes. We were there for 3 years, and so archaeological digs and all sorts of sites we visited, and oh my gosh, that was my life. I was lit up, and so. Through the partnership side, like, he got to see all the stuff on the other side, like the history and the anthropology side that he wasn't so interested in, but he was able to absorb that. And I had to live on a farm and rub cow shit on the side of a building as we were building this cob house. But that's what partnership looks like. So we do all of it.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. So we have our next guest in the waiting room. We have an open invite here, so whenever you come on the show, I mean, you can stay for as long as you want. So you are welcome to stick around and chat and ask some questions of our next guest too, if you would like. The one thing I want to make sure is that people know where they can find more information. They can connect with you, and then also you basically have an organization, I believe, that kind of. I think you're still running the school. Is that right? Where you do the 1 month immersions, or is that kind of been?
Well, we haven't done any of our trips. We canceled all of our trips in 2020. Haven't ran anything in 2021. We just scheduled our first trip here in Mexico for spring of 2022. But in the meantime, I've been supporting teens online through different courses, teaching them tools to manage their mental health, taking them into spaces of questioning their limiting beliefs, tools for coping, what does shadow work look like? All of that stuff are tools that I've been providing for teenagers, because right now they need it. Teens are struggling. So that's the work that I'm doing. And so you can, if they're interested in my travel work, projectworldschool.com is, still up. Transformative mentoring for teens is another place you can find me. And the third thing that I do is I have collaborated with another unschooling mom, and we teach parents how to create family cultures, live without rules, de-school, all of that stuff. And that's through partnershipparent.com. So Partnership Parent Movement is what the name of our group is for that. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
And I'd love to stick around and be a part of the conversation. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Anything else that you want to ask Lainie, David, before we bring in Manny here?
I think I have too many questions that I would not be able to do them justice. So we're gonna have to have Lainie back on at some point and do another deep dive.
I love it. Thank you, guys. It's been so much fun.
100%. All right, so Lainie's sticking with us. Love that. So coming on, we have our second guest. This is Manny, otherwise known as lowercase Liberty Optimist. How's it going, Manny?
Hey, guys. Ladies, hi.
What's going on, man?
So for anyone who is unfamiliar with you, Manny, I know we've been talking a lot, but I want to introduce you to the folks that are watching. So kind of Reader's Digest. Who are you and what's your background?
I'm just a nobody. I'm just I'm a random nobody on Twitter who kind of listens to a bunch of podcasts on liberty and individualism and creating the society that we want. And this is all good stuff. I hear a lot of noise in the air. I hear a lot of bickering and fighting, and here we are, liberty lovers, and it's in my heart that liberty begins right here. It doesn't begin anywhere else, right? Nothing outside of us can create liberty. This creates liberty inside me, and I love myself, and I love you, and I love my neighbors, and I love my enemies and whatever, right? And that's the way we create the liberty society. So I just decided to go on Twitter one day, because I'm full of I'm not ridiculously all PC, love everybody, like get in trouble that way. It's just I literally love everybody, not me, because everybody's got something wonderful to say, right? And so I decided one day to go on Twitter and just start making some noise about positivity, right? Optimism, right? How do we actually build the society that we want to build, rather than complaining about what we don't have, right? Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. And that's me. That's my online life. But also, I've been I wasn't why I'm on here. And Matt and I were talking a little bit earlier. I wasn't. I raised my hand when he put a little call out for adults who were raised unconventionally, and so I'm. I was raised in an unconventional way and had unconventional schooling, and I got a lot to say about that experience. Pros and cons both, right? And I listened to your 3-hour episode about all that, and I heard a lot of all the good reasons why to divorce the system, but none of the good reasons of what is it that's there that actually does benefit people, right? And what are we going to miss out on if we're just kind of divorce the system, right? And what do we need to actually replace, rather than the wonderful things that parents do much better than anybody else does, right? And we know that, and that's what we talk about in this unschooling, way. Yeah, but there's a lot of other, things that kids at home or kids in isolation, they miss out on. In being exposed to, what we as children would call the world, So, I got some, things to say about my experiences in that way too.
So let's kind of dig into that real quick. So you have an interesting background in that you grow up in, I don't know what you would classify it as, like a community or a collaborative.
Commune community.
Okay. And I think maybe I'm misunderstanding from our previous conversations, but was it distributed or was it concentrated in a specific area?
We had a number of chapters across the country, and I know you want to dig deep. I'm gonna be a little coy. I don't want to reveal too much,
That's okay.
whatever. I want to be as informative as is absolutely appropriate, and I don't without being too like, I don't know. Everyone's gonna dig in, or whoever's gonna find out can go find out. But give them a little challenge, right? So
Yeah.
so it's all good.
So you basically you had you had a collective that you were a
But
part of.
I told you all about it. So anything that I'm saying here is completely honest, right? And I'm not making shit up, right? So I told you all about it. I gave you all the details, Matt. So you can vouch for things that I say if you dug in a little bit or whatever.
Definitely. So I think what it amounts to is the way that you described it was essentially almost like a from this community or group, the different chapters that you were a part of. There was almost like a private school or a kind of like a organically created homeschool co-op, almost, if you want to call it that way.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's just say those are very pretty words.
Yeah.
so okay. So rubber meets the road, right? So here we are. We have before. As the first kids start popping up in this quasi-religious community, then after a few years of raising kids, then these people are like, what are we going to do with these kids? Honestly, like, these people are like removing themselves day by day, year by year from the world, isolating themselves within communities, various chapters across the country, and nonetheless, all these kids were being raised, and until for our first couple of years, we were all going to public school, and the community was trying to figure that out. What are our values, and how do we want to teach these kids, right? So at some point, some decision was made, and they decided to that they could form a legitimate school. So one of the chapters turned into a school, and all the kids were moved to that chapter, and it was a legitimate school in some sort of state ways. They organized it through the state. They said, we're gonna, I guess, I don't know the laws and the rules back then, or where they were in laws specific to that area. I don't know that particular, but it was a legal school for teaching us kids, and we. Thank goodness, ended up with some, real credits, because it was at some point that the whole thing just kind of kablooey ended, and so we kids were left kind of out on our own, all over again after quite a few years of being isolated.
So now,
not just isolated as part of this community, which is already isolating, but isolated in the in the school. The private school too.
So did you end up having to go back to a more conventional education, or was it something that you then kind of struck out on your own afterward?
Here's where I can espouse the glory of being alternatively educated in close proximity to the your parents and or loved ones or your close community, right? It's just one of these little gems of a success story, I guess. It's just a little thing, but when everything kind of was being shifted around, and I was and the school ended, I was approaching 11th grade, and so I didn't want to go back to public school. I just hated that thing already, right? So I tried for a year to do my GED, and I'm just not focused enough to get that done at my home, and my parents weren't really like directly involved with the school, as it were, as we had it, and so they weren't really prepared to homeschool me per se, right? So that wasn't like in the cards. So it was either GED or just not, and they were okay with me just not doing anything and starting work, right, or whatever it is. So yeah, I tried GED, and I really couldn't get that, homework thing and focus thing and just stay doing it and whatever. So anyway,
didn't jive with you. Yeah.
So a year later, after all that, and I decided, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to public school, right? Okay, great. I missed a year of school, but somehow I tested in to 12th grade. So I skipped a year of school, and I literally skipped a year of school, and whatever.
Yeah.
So it's just something strong. That's one small little strong anecdote to talk about how the quality of education that one gets from their parents and loved ones and close community is exponentially more than what one would get from strangers and institutional, and otherwise painful public school systems. So
yeah. One thing, let me kind of bounce it back to Lainie for a second. One thing that we didn't ask you prior was, before you decide to make the switch with your son, Lainie, was it something where you were just kind of okay with the public school and you didn't really question it? Or was it something that you were skeptical of that public education while your son was in that system?
I always, this is embarrassing and I'm going to out myself, but I never questioned that. I grew up with the cultural belief that education is important. And I grew up believing that I wasn't capable of giving my son what he needed. And I compartmentalized that and put it on a shelf, and that just was truth.
Yeah.
And until I had to question it, and until I worked in partnership with my son to redefine what was really important to us, I realized that it was just bullshit. It was programming. It was my programming. That was part of the belief that I had to de-school. So, I questioned everything except for that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a big fan of his education, like the school that he was in. We were living in downtown LA. We were in a loft. We were not in a great, school district. He was one of the only white kids in the class, which was great. I love the diversity. But it didn't match where he was at. Because he was a reader and had been a reader ever since, like he loved to be read to, and he read really, really quickly. Like by 6, he was reading full books. Like that's just who he was. The system that he was in never matched he finished very quickly. And so then the teacher would make him help the other kids, and the other kids resented him because he was the white kid, and he was the white kid that was smart, and he didn't have friends, and it was not a good situation. But I felt like I had no other option.
Yeah. That is also really difficult about a traditional centralized plan school system, is that depending on what type of learner you are, sometimes it can be very difficult because if you are not the type of learner, so like say you're more of that kind of like reader and creative learner, right? You don't end up typically being as embraced, I guess, by that very kind of like factory and regimented, learning system or learning style. Manny, what kind of learner would you say you were? Were you more analytical, kind of like, analyze, memorize, that kind of stuff? Or were you more creative, kind of experiential?
Definitely the latter. I do things and then I know how to do things, and then but if I'm not, books. No, reading is challenging for me, particular. And that's always been the case, and so that never really worked very well for me.
Yeah, and so the school that was set up, was it set up to mimic a traditional like public school experience, or were there some aspects of it that were a little bit more wide open?
So gosh, there's something that I really loved about our experience. I mean, it was very hard. The actual growing up in the community and all that, hierarchical way that actual real communes operate. Communal life is great, but it's not, we all know the problems with communism. We say it's all equality, but the reality is quite hierarchical, right?
Right.
So there's that. So there was problems with all that, and that was even more concentrated once all the kids and this energy was really focused on this one school. So everything was all together, and everything was concentrated. All the stresses and all the challenging situations were all hyper concentrated in that environment. So it was really challenging for us kids to grow up that way. So needless to say, all of us kids are going to be like, yeah, fuck that. Right? Seriously, right? But there were some really beautiful experiences that we did have in that school environment that were completely, you just couldn't replicate that anywhere else, right? So we had we had our curriculum, which is we had our math, we had our history, we had our foreign language, we had our other stuff, art class, right? We all loved the art class, and we had really, really great, caring members of the community who offered to teach us, and they were our teachers. With great experience, and we got some good education. Now, on top of that, there was always a time set aside in the day, every day, or every day for some. Though we had a name for this class. It was a very special class. So I'm not going to say the name, but whatever. We had a name for this special class. I'll call it the special class. And we had this class every day, and it was a class where we learned to be better humans, pretty much, right? And there's a gazillion way where you can, be a better human, but these are qualities that you just don't have the experience of learning in any other sort of a school system, right? Literally, like, how do you talk to someone? How do you acknowledge praise? How do you constructively criticize? How do you accept guidance, right? How do you interact with humans in a way that is, not falling victim to your inner demons? Because we all do, right? And that is the absolute worst thing that we do when we interact with each other, right?
Yep.
So we're like, oh, my inner demons, I'm so bad, and I can't even actually talk with you, that sort of thing. So we learned about these things as young children and older children and whatnot, and it's just it primed us for being, I don't know, just being adults. So in that way, in that inner human way, we were very well educated, right?
Yeah. I love that relational aspect of it, right? Like the and quite frankly, so that's the one thing, all of us will probably laugh. I know Lainie will laugh because I've seen a lot of these comments on the videos that, like, anyone who talks about homeschooling, they're always like, oh, well, your kids aren't going to be socialized, right? Like, they're going to be, they're going to be unable to have conversations with other people, or they're going to be really awkward, or they're not going to just get social cues or cultural cues and stuff like that. And I'm pretty sure that I'm speaking to or preaching to the choir, so to speak, in terms of the people that are on this broadcast. But it's complete crap. Like, kids are just inherently social, right? Like, they'll socialize with anyone. And so if you put them around a bunch of adults, they will socialize with adults, right? But if any of these co-ops and things like that kids are associated with, that when they are homeschooled, unschooled, world schooled, and things like that, they are going to find others to communicate with and kind of share with. I love the fact that in that semi-structured environment that you had, there was also this, component of, interpersonal skills and being able to relate to people. And you said something that's a big bugaboo for me. I'd love to hear your opinion on this one, David. The idea of being able to give someone constructive criticism or constructive feedback, right? Like, I don't think people truly understand what that is. Is that something, David, that gets taught in your school or in any of the classes that you have over there at your institution?
I would say it definitely gets taught. I mean, whether or not it's a class is a different thing, I guess. But we also have a mentoring program, which is pretty big on doing those types of things. So, obviously some kids have a hard time taking feedback, or other kids have a hard time getting to sleep at night, or other kids have a hard time with whatever X thing they're dealing with in life, right? So the mentoring program is big on that. We'll have one-on-one conversations with students, twice a month at least. I have like 6 mentees that, and you end up being really close with them, or hopefully, and establishing a really strong relationship with them where they can talk to you about things. It's kind of like an uncle, right? Like a loving uncle who's part of your family, right? I'm not dad, right? But I can come in and help you out with some advice from time to time, and then give you those types of so like you give them more direct feedback sometimes, right? And then like, okay, like I've heard from others, or like sometimes teachers will send you an email or will share with each other like, hey, he's in a funk lately. What's going on with him, right? And then the mentor will be like, oh, well, yeah, he's had some stuff going on. Just give him a break. Or, yeah, I don't know. Thanks for letting me know. I'll try to talk to him, right? So that type of thing that we can do behind the scenes as teachers to help the students out and see what's going on. And, that would be something where a teacher could come to me and say, hey, I've been trying to get through to this guy, and he's just really hard to give him criticism. What's a good way I can approach that, right? And then either because I know him really well, I can give the teacher advice on what to say, but I can also go to the student and say, hey, buddy, like I've heard from a couple people having a hard time getting through to you. What is that? What's going on with that? I've noticed that myself, or I haven't. What's going on? These guys, I think, are trying to help you, or just kind of have that conversation. I think, right? Obviously, you don't want to go into that conversation with like preconceived notion of what it's going to look like. Kind of defeats the purpose. But and we're also have a lot of the moral formation at the Heights is really one of the most important aspects of it. So I'd say that's kind of all falls within that category as well.
Yeah. I love that. The mentor aspect of it is huge, and you can get that. That's the other thing is like, again, moving from a conventional education mindset to more of like an open, dynamic learning mindset. You can get that mentorship or even just camaraderie from a bunch of different places, just you as an individual or for your kids. Right. And so it's just a matter of whether or not it's, it's healthy and actually facilitated versus if it's like, what's funny is when you were saying that, David, the first thing that came to my mind was, isn't that what a guidance counselor is supposed to do? Right. But they never do. Right. Because their job is basically to fill out a form and keep track of things and stuff like that. And there's only a moderate amount of that actual kind of like, counseling, mentoring.
And I think a lot of it is about future prospects, right? It's like about college and getting a job and things like that, rather than like, okay, a couple people told me that you're, seem tired lately. What's going on? Like that type of, that's not like a guidance counselor doesn't really do that type of, I taught in public school as well. And like, it was almost all about college and future, which is, that's their job, right? It's not like they're doing anything wrong, I think, but that was the whole point, dealing with behind the scenes stuff and transcripts and all that type of thing. So,
yeah. So let me kick it back to you, Manny.
Real quick though, I wanted to say that with that to answer that question, I think this helps to kind of get a better idea of what we're doing at where I teach, is that like all of the teachers are not hired because they're good at their subject. Like we might also be good at our subject, right? But like the main thing is that like they can do that thing that you're talking about, right? Where they can be a good mentor, where they can talk to someone about I forget your name already, but your lowercase Liberty. So
Lainie.
Manny, sorry, that's right. So what Manny was saying about, learning how to do those types of things, like that's like should be every class at our school. Like that's the most important thing that the teachers are able to present to the students is like how to talk to them, how to treat them like a human being, how to have good moral judgment, how to, be a real person, not to be taken advantage of, like all those types of things, like not to take advantage of others, certainly, right? Like how to deal with those types of issues and be a real human being, right? Like we're all gonna, and you need to have a certain amount of freedom, right? So that those things can crop up, and then you can say like, oh, hey, dude, like you shouldn't have said that to him. What were you thinking? Like, oh yeah, that's right, that was really dumb, right? Like so, but if you don't give the kids opportunity to like have those types of failures, they're going to do them outside of your presence, and then like you're going to have no idea what's going on. You can never have like a productive conversation. So, like I think that might help to give you. I know you guys have no idea where I teach or what it is, but like that I think is one of the centerpieces of what the school is attempting to do, at least, so you can have kind of an idea of where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I love that aspect of it. Yeah, whether it's dedicated time or if it's something that's a common thread throughout it, I think is fantastic. I promised Manny that I was going to take some time to kind of transition to things that you are working on or things that you've been involved in here. And
Not quite yet.
That's fine. If I
Oh no,
take it,
because I have more to say on this topic.
go ahead, take it where you want with the mentorship and things like that. Yeah, go for it.
Right. Because I just want to point out that there's something as this our conversation was just kind of spinning around. Something important about mentoring in context. So kids learn. Okay, qualify. There's social skills that one has with individuals, and there's societal skills that one has with the shit that we find out there in society, all the patterns, all the groups, all the everything else that's out there, right? Which is not, a small group of people. And the difference also between a close-knit group of families and your family and your loved ones and your community, a close-knit group who is mentoring you, and or a professional from the outside, in a professional setting that is mentoring you. Now, in the former context, you're going to get so many opportunities to really just hit the nail on the head, with the learning opportunities, because you're that close and you have the freedom to get deep, right? Mm-hmm. And to literally just stop the kid in the hallway and say, what's going on with you? Can we let's just have a moment here? And whatever you need to do, it's much more freedom for these closer adults to interact with the kids than a professional adult. And so you're just not going to get that sort of exposure. The kid is just not going to get that sort of exposure in the school environment to expose them to, I don't know, they're not going to get that sort of exposure from the school environment to navigate those sort of novel mental hurdles that they encounter. Like those learning moments won't happen in that environment, those deeper learning moments. I don't know if I'm being clear on this, but I'm just qualifying the difference between a community relationship or a community-based mentor and a professional-based mentor. And so there's that. And then the other first point that I brought up was, remind me, what was the first point that I just brought up?
Working through, I know we were going to talk about kind of like what you've worked into, but something you want to talk about in terms of like...
No, I was bringing up this mentor thing. So the second thing was the qualitative difference between community-based and the professional-based, right? And then the first thing was the difference between social skills and societal skills. And for sure, one who grows up in like we did in a relatively closed off community, where our interaction with the world was absolutely minimal. then the social skills class, that the special class that I just described, just taught us these personal skills, these interpersonal skills, and these interpersonal skills. Was great and taught me a lot on how to interact with human beings, one-on-one, one-on-5, 1-on-10. But when it comes to interacting with groups of human beings and knowing where I stand in a group and being at all not retarded in group settings, right? It's a waste of there was no opportunity for us to be exposed to the to society at large and literally just know here's all these groups and here's how to navigate these social groups, and here's where you lie. I mean, in the bigger picture as well as the smaller picture, I don't know.
Well, I love that there's a juxtaposition between kind of like your background and your family background in terms of that experiential piece, and the path that Lainie and her son took, right? So it definitely sounds like, I think the beauty here, and I think the answer that most people need to at least open themselves up to, is the fact that there is not one rote prescription for what constitutes a good educational path for yourself or your kids, right? You can get some substance out of most different directions that you could go with it, and there is a ton of different machinations or ways that can actually manifest itself, which is fantastic.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned it. I was thinking about this before when Lainie came on, because we're really, really different. Right? Like Lainie's a single mom. She's got one child, right? I have a very traditional marriage. I have 8 kids. I am a teacher, right? These are, I hate traveling. It's one of my, I just absolutely hate it. Right. So we're so different in all these very obvious ways. Right. But I think that's really cool what she's doing. I think, and I imagine that she is more than respectful of the way that I'm doing things. And that's the great thing about this community, right? Is and I'm sure that Manny might be somewhere in the middle or whatever, but the idea we're so diametrically opposed in just the way that we decide to live our lives and the way that we, decide to have our families and other types of things. Right. And it's that's cool. We just want to be able to live in a society where we're not trying to make people do those different types of things. And I think that tied into what Manny was trying to say earlier about in a commune, people say everything's equal, but it's really, we all know it's hierarchical. Right. And it seems I don't want to put words into his mouth, but the idea that your freedom is limited, you don't really have liberty in this place where you are supposed to have liberty, and how that can become a prison in of itself, right? Because oh no, you're supposed to be free here, enjoy it. This is your place, right? And it's but I'm not. I don't feel free, and yet you're telling me I'm supposed to feel free, and so that can create a really negative feedback loop. I think. I don't know, but I'd be interested in what you have to say about that as well.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'll get that in a moment.
Sure.
But I wanted to wrap up what I was
yeah,
saying.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's all good, because I do these circular things and they get a little long-winded sometimes, but then I close it off. So the closing off that I wanted to just say was in wrapping up the difference between the social skills and societal skills. I just wanted to close off. I just wanted to bring that home in the context of when someone comments on homeschoolers or homeschool kids not having social skills, right? I just want to be careful when the defense comes to that statement, and the truth is shared with these people that these kids are very well socialized because they're interacting with their close community and their close family, and they're learning adult skills and great. But it is possible that these kids not having so much societal exposure, might have a deficiency in societal skills. And I can guarantee, I can certainly say that all of us kids who were at the end of our school years, dumped onto into the world, as it were completely unprepared for okay, great, I can relate honestly and truthfully to a few human beings, but how many human beings in the world are skilled to really relate honestly and truthfully? Like, seriously, everybody's got their masks on, everybody's got their personas, and they're 10 feet away from you, they're talking, and nobody really gets close. So we were taught to be close, but we weren't taught to navigate the other stuff. So, that's important skills, even though we think it's a bunch of bullshit. I do, I think all these masks and personas are bullshit, right? But, it's the way that all of us get around in the world, right? And so, so learning these skills is also important.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think you draw a good point. What's funny is there's a couple of people who say this, but people that are like adamantly opposed to certain things, a lot of times they use their own shortcomings as a critique of the thing that they're being critical of. And so I would say, like, someone who is a adamant traditionalist about, traditional public school, and that's the way it needs to be and things like that. These, like, this projection of, homeschooled or unschooled kids or whatever lack societal skills, to your point, Manny, and I think this was in there, but kids who go through traditional school and a lot of times are left lacking in societal skills as well, which I think is, again, they're going to use it as a way to undermine, what some parents are doing. And yes, I mean, anyone who essentially has their world kind of dramatically limited in terms of their interaction with, broader society, will have some of that issue.
Yep.
And
we can be proactive in exposing kids to those things.
Yes. Yeah. And sitting in a box for 6 to 8 hours a day with, 12 other kids isn't exactly, exposing them to society.
No,
right?
No, not even 12, not even 24. No, you literally need randomness. You need to interject randomness and chaos into the situation.
Yes.
Periodically into the social situation.
I like that idea. A little, some positive chaos.
Well, I think that even just manage to they have to go to the mall and interact with people or something, right? Like go to a park and there's random kid who you don't know who wants to go on the slide in front of you, and you're like, I don't know what to do because that's not my brother and it's not my really close friend. It's just some random kid, and I don't know how to navigate that, right? Like, I think that makes perfect sense,
Yep. Yeah, you do. And encourage the kids to make friends with people that the adults would not agree with.
Yeah. And
I mean, seriously.
And Lainie, to your point, your son was interacting with people in another language from another country with different cultural norms, I guess I would call it. So there was some societal skills laid to work there.
Yeah, the comment that I wrote in the private chat was world schoolers don't have that problem. They're exposed to all different ages, all different walks of life, economic statuses, belief systems. Like, the diversity is massive, and you learn to communicate respectfully. You learn to listen. You learn to integrate, and especially as a world schooler, you learn to recognize that your worldview is just a singular way of seeing the world, that you may be looking at a fire and somebody next to you is seeing something completely different, and they're both right perspectives. So it's one of the reasons why I love world schooling is there is that expansion of worldviees.
Yeah, most definitely. So, all right. Was there another road you wanted to go down, Manny, or because there is a couple of organizations I want to make sure that I highlight here that you had brought up. So
yes.
Hey guys, I'm sorry. I gotta go grab my kids. They got out of something early and they're waiting there. So I apologize for having to bounce out early, but
go control the chaos, David.
Yeah, that's right. All right, man. I appreciate it. See you later, you rule followers.
So which one do you want to tackle first, Manny?
Yeah. Thanks. all of a sudden the screen got narrow.
Yeah.
I lost my horsey. There's my horsey
I,
butt.
I can broaden it for you if you want.
Oh.
There you go.
Gotta have the horsey. Oh, I seriously have rainbow horses all over. Rainbow little ponies, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I just it's a fun little totem or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. So yeah. Now I got involved in the Libertarian presidential campaign last year, and I was working with a lot of volunteers, helping them out, and I this is just a little bit of backstory. I'm a web developer of like 20 years. I got just been doing webby stuff for a long time, and so I got involved in this campaign, and I just instantly saw how not great the tools were. The tools for communication and collaboration, and so over the last it's been pretty much a year now. I've been off and on rehashing and presenting to people this idea of how can we help that? Like what can we make to help I don't know, collaboration tools, and at first it was for political campaigns, for liberty oriented political campaigns, right? But in the as of these days, long story short, I'm starting a cooperative of.
Lainie's gonna go start dinner. That's okay. No, I want to make sure that she doesn't get away from her duties for the evening. So
I'm so sorry. I didn't want you to interrupt.
No.
But
Lainie, check out voluntary.cloud. You should write that down and check it out. And that's what I'm working on. And it's a platform that's also going to be possibly of assistance to homeschooling communities.
Okay, and
it's a cloud collaboration tool set. And I'm sorry I get long-winded, but that's the bottom line. It's a cloud collaboration tool set for voluntary communities to get shit done.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm scooting out early. That's I got okay. Couch surfers. So I'm going to start on dinner, but yeah. Thank you so much. And sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, lady. Have a good night.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Nice meeting you all.
So I'm going to pull up the website here, and if I can make my computer work correctly, here it is. Right, so
yeah, cloud. Right. So I've been working on this, kind of recruiting people to get together and kind of hash out the details and actually make this happen. Now, whoever's interested, you just read this whole thing. This is a long web page, and at your own leisure. But whoever's interested in this idea, basically, if you have a community, or you're looking to have a community, and you want to collaborate with others, and you don't want to use Google Docs. Maybe you do want to use free Google Docs, but it's but then you're like, oh, all my data is and Slack and Zoom, not only they're hacking, I don't know, they're all my data is owned by them, or maybe you have issues with paying for multiple services and that money is just going out the door, or you're getting it for free. Great, you're getting it for free, but there's, I don't know, as organizations have a hard time doing that, nonprofits sometimes, giving their data to third-party organizations. So basically, if paying some money for these what would otherwise be free services, but not so free because we know hidden costs, if paying some money is at all an option for some community groups out there, then this is a win-win-win situation for everybody, because what we're starting is a cooperative. Basically, every community of 5 people, 10 people, 100 people that want to have an online collaboration space has the opportunity to own their own server that's running an online collaboration suite. And every community, every group, every one of these servers that's owned and operated, by an organization, you draft your own volunteers to come work inside that community and get stuff done online. Collaborative documents, video calling, chat space, yada yada. So the beautiful thing about this, here's how it's a win-win-win situation. It's a cooperative model, and so by joining in the co-op, either as an organization or an autonomous group of some sort, of any sort, non-incorporated or anything, and or individuals, so you can become a member of this co-op, and both the organizations and the individuals who participate in the collaboration, everybody wins by being a cooperative. There's annual membership fee, and that annual membership fee pays for the cloud collaboration tools that you use, right? Mm-hmm. And the bottom line is that the annual dividends from the co-op, the cooperative, pays out what it costs us to run the servers. We use to pay for the servers, but everything else that's collected from those membership fees, everything else gets put in a pot, and that pot gets distributed to our prize participants across the whole community space, right? And so this is a way to reward participation within your own community by your community members and your community itself being members of this cooperative.
So let me just kind of like ask a point of clarification, or I think I get it, but I want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So a bunch of different organizations are going to use voluntary.cloud. Right. A piece of the annual fees.
Oh, and they can work together on projects too. The collaboration is cross-organizational.
Oh, I love that too. Yeah. Yeah. So you can have not just work within your work group, but also across. That's fantastic.
Just like Slack, just like Microsoft One Office space,
And so the annual fees go into a hat, so to speak. From the hat, the operating expenses are paid out for the server hosting and things like that. And then what's left over, there's basically a gamification of your involvement, and the folks that are, say, like the highest point getters or whatever, the most active, they have the opportunity to then get some of their money or most of their money back.
Well, it's like so there is that. Now the groups that host the collaborative suite. There's a group of 10 people. There's an organization that's established organization, or there's a group of autonomous people, whatever. If you are running a server, if you are running a server, you pay for that server. It's those server fees that get put into the bucket. Okay. And when you're running a server with 10 collaborators, you're working on a project. Those collaborators are also members of the co-op. They everybody's fees are actually written in the website, and I forget the actual numbers. I apologize right now. But the major fees are paid for hosting the servers, and so so it's not like you get money back. It's like literally you get money. Yeah. But it's you literally get paid for cooperating in the it's not like a lot of money or anything. It's just a little bit of like a token of reward, and the way that you get points for participation, and the way that those points are divvied out per community is up to that community. So yeah. I'm not going to get into more details at the moment because it's all a work in progress, and it's nothing really set in stone except the fact that a cooperative model is a way for everybody to win, and a cooperative and we're building a cooperative hosting model we're building a cooperative model for hosting collaboration tools online, and that's the bottom line right there. Yeah, and everything else is just details to be ironed out.
And I love the fact that this is, technically it is kind of a competitor, at least to some functionality that Facebook provides, right now, and because a lot of volunteer groups and things like that use, like, say, like a Facebook group to collaborate.
Let's be clear. What the strengths of Facebook and Twitter are in that they have universal reach. You can literally connect with anybody else on Facebook and Twitter, and this is not going to replace that. This is not the reach out platform. It's a social media platform. But what people are also using Facebook for is what would otherwise be private conversations and collaborative efforts, which Facebook doesn't even have a tool set for that. And then so they're using other different platforms, and they're like, oh, does everybody have a Gmail account? Because now we need to do Google Docs too, or, oh, let me send you a link to this Zoom call. Oh, but wait, you have the, I don't know, do you have the Zoom account? No, you don't have the Zoom account, so our meetings can only be 45 minutes. And guess who's listening in, and who knows what else,
Right.
So it's not only a streamlined tool set that is actually focused on collaboration for small teams or large teams, but within the team, not like, you can have open collaboration. You can get a server and have it like invite only, or you can get a server, you can set up the server how you want. You can have it like anybody can join from the public, whatever you want. It's your server, you set it up. It's totally available to you, but it's not going to replace social media. Mm-hmm. But what social media is trying to do, because people lack these tools in a streamline in a cohesive fashion, and because the reason they lack these tools in a cohesive fashion is because everybody wants to make a buck. Google wants to make a buck. Microsoft Office wants to make a buck on the tools that they're selling you. They're not really interested in being the one all, unless it's unless they can make a buck off of that. And great, making a buck is great, but making a win-win-win buck is even better, where everybody, wins from the collaboration. Right now, it's like, not only are you going to pay for these professional level Google, you have to pay for Google for, business level, and Microsoft and Zoom and Slack, they all have these business accounts. But your data is also, you don't own your data, and you have limited access. Frankly, like, our big problem with the campaign was we literally didn't have access, because we were using the free Slack. We didn't have access to all of our previous posts. That's ridiculous. And Slack sells you access to your own fucking data. So so that's stupid. So anyway.
Which has become no, that's okay. We could do an entire show off of data privacy and ownership and stuff like that. But I'm right there with you, because I'm also a big proponent of blockchain, and so blockchain is very similar dynamic where it's that democratization of data, but at the same time you also take control, and you're getting rewarded for participating, as opposed to just all of the rewards being, one-sided, which it sounds like your platform is affording. At least, like you said, you're not going to retire on the money, but it gives you the ability at least to earn a little bit off of, your hosting.
More than earning, it's the concept of being rewarded. It's the concept of recognition. This is like a social recognition program, with built on steroids, or with a boost. It's being recognized, and it's being recognized with meaning. If I say good job, and everybody knows that you did a great job. Oh, and by the way, here's $5. That just cements the message of you did a good job. That's all that does. But it's real. It makes it real. And
it's something.
It's something. And so we originally designed this model to work on a blockchain. We were investigating various different blockchains to do this, but the smart contract situation on any of these blockchains is just not sophisticated enough to really run even a percentage of this on the blockchain. So we opted for this cooperative model to establish the backbone of the rewards, of rewards being based on dividends and yada yada, from the cooperative, and then we at any later time, once we establish and everybody like, I love this thing, then we can start moving the rewards model to the blockchain. And what that does is then you literally have ownership of everything that you've done, and not just everything you've done, but all the credits that you've gotten, all the kudos that you've gotten, all the good work that you've done for all these communities, these do good whatever communities that you've been working on in the voluntary cloud system. You are an individual. Maybe you're a member of 10 different communities. Maybe you're working quote unquote voluntarily, maybe for a little bit of buck here or there, but it's not a lot. It's just, like I said, it's more of the social rewards thing. Now you get all those rewards, you get all those kudos, and those are then stored on the blockchain. This is down the road. Those are then stored on the blockchain, and you can literally then go to any organization, you can go to any company, put it in your resume, and it's proof that you literally did all this good work. So
yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I love that.
So we're basically we're working to build a platform where voluntary collaboration is not only much more efficient and possible, and not only that everybody involved wins and is recognized, but also becomes part of your something that you can carry with you. But that's another thing. Blockchain integration down the road.
And so the present iteration, you're basically in a demo kind of phase right now.
We're pre-demo at the moment. All that's needs to happen is to set up a server that's running this open source software. It's already existing. It's called Nextcloud. That's providing the backbone functionality for all these the video conferencing and the document collaboration and the group messaging and whatnot. So yeah, that's an open source platform. All those tools already exist, and it's open source and it's modular, which means we can add functionality as we need. And so just setting that up is going to instant all that functionality, but the rewards model is not part of that. So that's that would be our task is, 6 months out, once we have, 10, 20 communities that are interested in just collaborating without the rewards model, then we start building that into the system, adding as a module for Nextcloud. And so then that's running on our servers, and it's instantiated with every new server that we spin up. And that's just part of the voluntary cloud integrated into the voluntary cloud server, package is you have this additional Nextcloud plugin, which provides the rewards. The rewards basically say, every community can be set up, and it says, when someone sets up a community, they say, here's what we're going to give rewards out for all the people that do good work, and they kind of tailor it themselves. And then the people come in and they do their good work, and they get some rewards, and at some point that's translated down after on an annual basis. All those rewards are translated into actual dividend payouts. But in the interim, it's just data that's stored in the server, in each individual server of their participants' participation.
Fantastic! I love that. I love that you took an experiential part of something that you're involved in and use that to solve for a problem.
I'm really not into complaining. I'm really just into doing shit.
I love that. I love that. And so to kind of bring the conversation full circle, the commune or the collective that you were a part of growing up, they have stayed together in a certain endeavor here, I believe, and members of that group have operate now this Best
I don't want to
Friends
get
organization?
into it.
Okay, that's fine. We don't necessarily have to chat about that too much, but I think it says something that they're like, regardless of what groups you're a part of throughout your life, they leave lasting, relationships, friendships, as well as skill sets and things like that come with it, and they can transcend themselves. So whether they start or stop, or they continue on throughout your entire life, they have a long-lasting effect, which is fantastic.
Well, let me just put in add to that good note, and I think the most important thing about where we would have gone with that is this takeaway, that regardless of how groups of people get together or don't get to, or like it's either successful group of people or it's not a successful group of people, right? Every opportunity for people to collect together and do stuff, actually like do stuff and be productive and be honest with each other and trade ideas. The longer that group of people stays together, problem solving together, the more the higher potential they will have as a group to do more stuff and do bigger stuff. And so that just speaks to the skills that we learn by doing together. The social skills, the skills what I'm saying is, when people are successful in doing stuff together, the skills that they take away from that, regardless of whether that collaboration was a success 5 years or 10 years or whatever, the skills that one takes away from being successful in collaboration with others is a skill set that will help them be collaborative and be even more successful with even more others. So that's the big takeaway from the experience of our community that I grew up in, is that whether or not that community exists anymore, these people involved have learned to be successful, and that experience has been with them for their whole life and has influenced all the successful things that they collectively and individually have done.
I love that. Yeah, no. And look, I think that's actually a fantastic point to end on, because it's something that a lot of folks will ask, well, what am I going to get out of whatever the opportunity is, or the possibility, or if it's a life change, like what am I going to get out of it, and what is it going to do for me over the long run? I think the answer is it's going to have a lasting effect one way or the other, right? And I love the fact that if a community or a group focuses on certain these aspects of whether it be problem solving or interpersonal skills, or being able to relate to each other, whether you're a homogeneous group or a very heterogeneous kind of mixed group, I think all of those things have a lifespan that stick with you. And so it's worth
positive influences.
Yes, those experiential parts of your life have a long-lasting effect, which is fantastic.
Because every human is a wonderful human. And anytime one can experience another human's company is a great thing.
Yep.
Do we need to say more?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that's a mic drop.
Damn.
Yes. So everyone, I would say, if you are involved in any kind of voluntary organizations, whether they be formal, or if they're just kind of groups of friends that get together and do nonprofit volunteer work or something like that, definitely hit up voluntary.cloud and check that out. Put your email address in so you get notifications when everything goes live officially. And yeah, look, I want to say thank you for sharing your story, Manny. And it's the things that resonate the most with people aren't like taglines and mantras and logos and stuff like that. They are people's actual stories of what they've lived and kind of what they've taken from it or learned from it. And so I want to say, thank you for taking the time and sharing your story here.
My pleasure.
So a reminder to everyone who's made it to this far, we will be back next Monday with some more stories. Monday night, every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. And let's see, next week we're talking about crypto. So, dynamite lead in, Manny. We talk about blockchain here near the end. We're going to be talking about crypto and being able to, have voluntary exchange outside of the classic, dollar fiat currency platform. So should be really interesting. We're going to do 101, very basic kind of like walkthrough of crypto. So with that, any final comments, Manny?
No.
Everyone get a unicorn.
or
a pony with a rainbow mane.
It's rocking.
Yeah.
It's rocking.
Love that. So look, have a good evening, Manny. Thank you.
Yeah, you too now. Peace.
Bye, everyone.